Matt Simpson, here from the ACLU of Texas. Appreciate a chance to talk about a couple of items here. Of course, first I want to say thank you, Senator Lucio, for your language narrowing the smuggling provisions. I'm registered as opposing, and that's primarily because of those smuggling provisions just being a little bit too broad. Thank you for tightening them up. Appreciate it. The second thing, kind of second on the list, is that I would point out that I think that there continues to be a concern that nobody's really mentioned yet with the reference to federal law. And, like I said, I think that the requirement that you be seeking financial gain reduces the likelihood that this will be applied to people that are really not doing anything, not doing the kinds of things we want to apply a third-degree felony to be perfectly honest. But it seems like it could present some challenges, and this is a very standard concern. The bill references someone being in violation of federal law, and so it's an element of the crime. And so it puts law enforcement in the field in the position of having to try to determine whether a human being is, where their status is, and are they a legal permanent resident, a citizen, or something else. And so I think I just wanted to raise that. That's always kind of a concern when state law tries to sort of puts judges and law enforcement in a position of having to interpret that. But again, because that provision is narrowed, it's of far less concern. The second is that I wanted to clarify the feasibility of the checkpoints piece. To me, doesn't indicate that DPS will have the full authority to go forward should these be feasible, but that they'll come back to the legislature and indicate whether it's feasible and what it would look like. I would assume that the legislature would want to maintain that kind of, just kind of decision making. I would imagine that this bill isn't designed to just once a feasibility study is complete for DPS to go forward, regardless of the price tag, for example. And the last piece is that the ACLU actually works quite a bit on fusion centers and information exchange, and I think it's an important part of law enforcement. It's also important to have really good policies in place. We worked here in Austin with the ARIC to put in place a privacy policy that was kind of tailored to the Austin community, and I think that we've worked with a number of other fusion centers here and there, and I would suggest just on that point that as that transnational information exchange center is being put together, I would encourage you all to bring in local community members that have input on just the privacy policies and how it'll be set up.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, quick question. Yes. Just wondering about the section that terms the technology policy, and where it says here, the system provides the department the best ability to monitor and investigate criminal activity on the Internet. Have you looked into the potential monitoring of American citizens without their knowledge? Is that what you were referring to, what you were talking about?
Right. I think that what we've seen at other fusion centers is when you put in a policy that says, no one can be monitored based only on First Amendment activity, or no one will be monitored based, or even on their religion and that kind of thing, it greatly reduces the likelihood that there'll be this kind of phishing expedition and people's privacy will be invaded.
So the protocols for this Internet monitoring to help deal with the concerns that I have about Fourth Amendment violations and that sort of thing. Is that what you're referring to?
I think that would help, yeah. I think, although, I don't think that there was a component in the privacy policies we worked on that addressed, website monitoring, but I'd be glad to chat with you about that. That's something I think is important.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree.
Okay. Senator Rodriguez.
I wonder if you could expound a little bit more about the concern you're raising about the reference to in violation of federal law.
Sure. I think the concern is just that, a local law enforcement officer is going to have been trained and have experience with state law and with local ordinances, but very rarely do they have a working knowledge of what's a very complicated body of law, federal immigration law. It would be, it's sort of akin in some ways to asking a local law enforcement officer to, look at a tax return, right? I mean, these are civil bodies of law with kind of administrative code and other things that are pretty complicated. As you all know, there are a variety of different immigration statuses, for example, and they can function quite differently with different amounts of time that one could be present legally and that kind of thing. So it's a lot of information. It's a lot of background information for law enforcement to be expected to understand, and what we really don't want, just to kind of, the short version is we just don't want race to become a proxy for undocumented, right? I mean, the concern is the worst possible outcome would be racial profiling, right? And so we certainly want to avoid that. And I know, Senator Birdwell, I think, has a measure in his bill that's up later that says something about law enforcement will not racially profile, and maybe that's a piece that we could consider for this bill as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.